Hello everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Dutch BI podcast, episode number 16. So, basically we have two very special guests, and of course my evil sidekick Sven is also here. But today we also have Juergen, Haupt and Ulrich in the podcast to talk about something called S4HANA Analytics with CDS views and BW as
evolutionary
extension. That's my trick word again. So guys, welcome to the podcast. And I see Juergen is up in smoke, so that's good. So it's a podcast, so we should be smoking, of course. Right. So maybe for the guys at home who don't know you guys, but that will be very strange. But Juergen, can you give a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah. My name is Juergen Haupt. I'm now working for the product management, sub BW and HANA, and formerly for the RIC. And yeah, my favorite topic is data warehousing in any flavor we can imagine.
Great, thanks. Ulrich.
Yeah, my name is Ulrich Christ. I'm in the same team as Juergen. I was there before him.
Yeah.
But yeah, my history is basically in BW development. I was a development architect in BW for, I don't know, 8 years or so. And after that I switched to product management.
Right. And Sven, we all know you.
Yeah, thank you.
So what we did is Sven and myself we created some slides to kick it off. So basically the idea was to talk about S4HANA because there's a lot of stuff coming our way, especially for us BW consultants. It is a revolution in itself. A couple of weeks ago we had a session here in Eindhoven from Juergen to talk about the LSA++ architecture, and what we saw on these slides basically is that there are some new developments. So one of these things is, of course, that we have lots and lots of real-time analytics now coming from the source. So that could in effect come from the HANA Live views, but also from embedded BW. And there's also something called CDS views nowadays. And we want to really talk about those because these seem to be coming into play more often. But quite honestly, I have some difficulty to understanding exactly how the linking pin is between BW and S4 and all the rest of it. Now to have somewhat of a streamlined process, we have some slides. So of course we start off with the disclaimer. So everything we discuss here, Sven, that's especially important to you.
Yeah, I know. We stole this one from SAP. This is our non-disclosure agreement.
So the first slide I have over here is something called SAP HANA Platform and Modern Data Warehouse Repository Permeable Persistent Layers. And what we see here is I guess, let's say a picture which is more or less, let's say, what we've known today. So we have an operational source. Then we have something called actual most recent. So not only we have the source, but also we bring something into HANA or basically into BW with open ODSs. Then we have the raw data warehouse, and we have the integrated into data warehouse, and we have some bottom-up and we have some top-down. And I think especially that bottom-up part is something which is somewhat of a new modeling approach, Ulrich and Juergen, if I'm not mistaken. And basically we have now more and more analytical operational data sources, which we used in the past did not have. So is that a different way of modeling than compared to the old BW days, let's say?
Juergen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Yes, of course it is. In former times, or not even today, the data are without any prerequisite, more or less. The data are moved, extracted to BW, and then you build your BI content. This is a normal way how it is done today, and this will. So this will partially, I would say, change in the future, especially with the new possibilities to directly do analytics on the source data, like it is offered with S4HANA or on the suite on HANA with HANA Live. And This means the people will start to use the delivered virtual data models. Ulrich will show to you in a second, and expand these models, but they will reach borders. So they will reach the border, for example, if they want to do BI on snapshot data. So most recent on the operational data BI means that the data are always the latest state. So if there's a change, then they immediately will change. This is wanted very often, but not always. And if you need a snapshot, then you need an additional persistency. And these persistence be modeled and be maintained and in an environment. And this is the first step to a data warehouse. So, but then, quite obviously, you come from the bottom and you build, as it is mentioned on this slide, the data warehouse persistencies only if it is required by the business or by certain service level agreements. And this means also the overlap. This is different maybe into other presentations of the layers, that the upper layers, of course, in the future will partially use the lower levels directly without moving data from one layer to another.
Yeah, and I think there was something like a risk you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, is the stovepipe risk, because at a certain point in time you probably go from operational reporting into something which is then needing persistency in the BW area. And of course, if you have a finance flow or an accounts payable flow or whatever, there is a risk, of course, then when you translate that into the enterprise model, that you basically start off with a, let's say, a sort of a stovepipe construction.
Yeah, and this is the reason. The more that the reporting is spanning a certain source, so multi-source related or whatever, the more obviously we come to a business integrated approach, and this has to be modeled top down.
Right.
As we are used to do.
Yeah, I think the difficulty we often see nowadays is that, and I think that will be something, I guess, which will be more in the future, is that the good part is, I guess, that a lot of the operational reporting which is currently being done in BW is being pushed back where it belongs. So that's basically into the source reporting, more or less. That's good, of course. The complexity will be for architects and people, let's say, trying to create those models and embedded scenarios and to come up with the best approach for each specific scenario. I think that will be because I always say you have this enormous box of candy nowadays and you have all the flavors in the world. But you have to pick out what exactly you need, of course, and that's becoming more and more difficult because of the extreme flexibility we have nowadays with BW and also with the S/4HANA analytics which are coming. But that's something. Go ahead.
This is why we differ in this picture between, we call it a raw or domain data warehouse, and the business integrated classic enterprise data warehouse. The raw or domain data warehouse is dominated by a main source, let's say an S/4HANA system, whereas an enterprise data warehouse integrates the data warehouse the data from different equivalent sources. And this differentiation was not made so explicit in the past because we had to move all the data to BW anyhow.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
But now it makes sense. So the raw data warehouse is more bottom-up driven, whereas a enterprise data warehouse, of course, is top-down driven.
Yeah. All right. So if I get back to the next slide, I think that's more or less what we just discussed as well. So we have somewhat of a different picture regarding LSA++. With the new business integrated layer, which you just explained. The core concepts, of course, are still the same. The biggest change I would see is indeed that the majority of the operational reporting will go back to where it belongs. So that's more or less what we just said. And then we come to the interesting picture where we basically the integration of S/4HANA Analytics and SAP HANA Live MBW as the evolutionary extension. And this is also one of the first slides where I saw the CDS views coming to life. Yeah, and I'm very curious to see how this all comes together. So on the one hand side, we're used now to HANA live views coming from the suite for HANA. Now, S4HANA probably also brings some new functionality with the CDS views. And on top of that, we also have embedded BW, which seems to be getting a second life again. So could you explain something about this concept for us and how this all ties together?
We can actually show it to you, I would suggest. So we can actually jump into the system, and I can share a quick demo with you.
That would be
great.
Up for that. Let me just check if I pick the right.
So if I stop sharing, so you probably can now share again.
Okay, I should be sharing now.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
It's an empty analysis office plugin here. Now what I'm doing here, no, that's not. At first sight, it looks very boring. I open something which looks, well, like a BW info provider, and after a few seconds, oh, okay, I should have logged on. Check if I know my password. Would spoil the whole thing. Okay, looks good. And we see some sort of a result.
Yes.
We can, for example, drill down by. We see what's interesting. We have some status fields here. It really looks like a big info cube or a big DSO, right? Status fields.
And where are we reporting now on top of Ulrich? Is that?
Let's see what we're doing.
Right.
That was not interesting. Overall status, maybe that one. Right, and two different types of status, completed and not completed. If you go here into the details, you can see that you can display things as text and key, just all the regular BW functionality. Unfortunately, this example, now you see key and text, could also, for example, look at one of the dimensions here, customer group, or customer material, and you would see one thing which is maybe more interesting, I don't know. Material would actually, no, material is not in there. You could, for example, also see all the attributes of the object. So it really feels like a BW info provider. But the interesting thing is there is no BW info provider really involved in this here. There's no BW modeling behind the scenes. It's all based on something else. And that something else is, let me stop sharing this one. Do you know if I can also share my whole screen instead of an individual application? Entire screen, there we go. It's probably better. What's really behind the scenes, if we go to this system, no, that's the wrong one. And I explicitly and deliberately go to ABAP and sub GUI now. QJ3, that was the system we just worked in. Let's try to start RSA1. And the system will complain, no, this is not a BW client. So what we're actually working with, don't know if you saw it, says it's a simplified suite special sLog test system, so for the simplified logistics.
All right.
This is really an S4 system, a test system in the landscape for the logistics development. But still, of course, we can use functionality like RSRT in there. And look at this thing here. That's exactly, will show us exactly the data which we saw before. So what's actually happening, or what was happening when I opened Analysis Office, was that basically in the background some sort of BW query was executed. Check carefully, this is exactly the same structure which we saw before. We could do exactly the same stuff. But, as I said, there's no BW info objects involved. There's no BW model involved. In fact, what we see, or where the metadata comes from, that's something completely else, and that's the so-called CDS model.
Okay.
Right. So here, if you look at the name here of this object, there's a kind of slightly weird prefix. There's a 2C in front, and then there's also a little bit cryptic name, ISD sales stock item. If you look at this here, That's sales order item. Anyway, sales document item. Here we can jump into that one.
These CDS views are basically a way of exposing, let's say, the ECC tables to the outside world, let's say. And in this case,
this is really part of the ABAP infrastructure what we're seeing.
Yeah.
This is now I'm looking at we're in Eclipse, but this is ABAP in Eclipse. If you look at this here, and basically what we're doing here, or what we're seeing here, is a kind of next generation data dictionary object. CDS is basically an extension or part of the data dictionary, which allows us to do much more complex stuff than you could do with SE11 in the past. So, for example, you can define. Yeah.
Short question: Is this some kind of successor of SAP River? Because I see association types coming back in, and I know the River project was aborted, and something new has been created as successor of River. But do you know if this is the successor?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Let's see. What we see here, we see lots of. Okay, now we have the right view. Sorry for the confusion here. And we see a bunch of associations. That's true. Actually, I wanted to show you even more associations. Now I'm a little bit confused. Sales document item. Maybe we have to go to the item level. That's better. Yeah, that's better. If you look at that one, so it looks like SQL in here in this area, right? You have define view and a certain view name as select from. Then you find one of the tables in R3 or also in S4, which you're probably familiar with. But it's more complex than what you can do with the data dictionary, right? You can define left outer joins here. You join even more tables, so that kind of join complexity was not possible with CDS before, with the data dictionary before. And on top of that, it's not only a SQL view definition, but it also has some strange so-called annotations up here, and then all these associations, and I'll explain you in a few words what this really means. Well, this here, the text is just the textual representation, which is language dependent. If you log on in a different language, you will see it in another language. What's important here is, for example, here this analytics annotation. Also very interesting here to see that there's a property, an analytic property, which tells you that data extraction is enabled for this view, which we'll come to this later, since we're talking about BW as well. This basically means that this view can be used to extract data from an S4 system into BW. This is basically the basis of a BW data source. We'll see that in a few minutes.
So it's sort of also an extension to current extractors, let's say. So if you want to extract persistency, then you could use a CDS view for that.
Exactly, and in the long run, this is going to be the kind of the renewed version of classic extractors for S4HANA. So S4HANA extraction, that's the strategy, will be based on CDS views.
Okay.
Ulrich, when you want to query this data, does that setting also needs to be set to true, or is this only for persistent data extraction?
That's only important when you want to extract data to some.
Okay, so for our example, when you just query it, it shouldn't necessarily need to be true.
Exactly. For this example, we would not have needed this property.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Now, if you go into the details here you see the structure of this view, all the fields, and they get kind of nicer names. That's the original name as it comes from the VBUP table, and it's renamed to sales document and so on, and we see what the key fields are of this object. This is also an interesting part here. If you look at the field which is externally called order quantity, it is assigned some sort of default aggregation, and it is also assigned a unit of measure. So basically this information tells us that this field is a key figure and what the relevant unit is. Right? So the unit, we should find it somewhere here. Order quantity unit, it's this field, and this field has again an annotation which tells the reader of this document that this is a unit of measure. So you basically have all all the additional metadata which you need on top of the plain SQL structure. And you know what is a key figure, you know what's not a key figure, and if it's not a key figure, it's a characteristic basically. That's the logic behind it. If it's a key figure, you know how to aggregate it, and you can specify it. and you can specify the relations between key figures and units or currencies, right? Now there's this association stuff which Sven mentioned already, and what this association stuff is about is basically, well, providing additional information which is related to this fact table, right? Right now we're looking at sales document items. That's basically, from an analytic perspective or from a multidimensional perspective, it's facts or transaction data. But of course, to almost all of the fields which we saw down there, we have additional master data or text at least, right? You don't want to see the material, for example, always displayed as key. You want to have it displayed as text, ideally language dependent. If you log on, you would like to see it in Dutch. I want to see it in German or English. Anyway, so all these things need to be, these relations need to be maintained somewhere, and that's part of this association information. So basically, we see here, for example, that the field material in the view which we are in is the basis for an association to another CDS view, which is called I_material. Right? If you go to this I_material view, it's probably much simpler. It has just a few fields, 3 fields: material, number, material type, and material group. And we have again associations, because this goes on from master data to other master data. The material type has again its attributes, and the material group has attributes, and the material number, of course, at least has a text, right? So that's basically a whole network of these associations, and all this together basically is now a query runtime read by, and now we have the first connection to BW here by the BW OLAP engine, and kind of internally turned into something which feels like a BW info provider. Yeah. So really go into, well, here RSRT or any frontend which can connect to BW and run queries.
Well, this is really a completely, let's say, different step than the HANA live views, let's say, which were originally ported as being a transactional content, let's say, from when Suite on HANA was introduced. So I think there are many, let's say, calculation views which already are created on this stuff. Is this going to be this is really going to be the way forward for S/4HANA, I suppose? That so there will not be, or will there be overlap? Let's say that there will still be HANA live views next to CDS views, which will be supplied by SAP, or can we say that CDS views are the new way of exposing, let's say, operational reporting into queries and BO, for instance?
Yeah, I would say the latter. So especially for all the embedded reporting, which is coming within the new build Fiori UIs in S4, this is the technology which is going to be used. So that's the basis for all the embedded S4 analytics. Of course, you can still probably reuse some of the HANA Live content in S4, but you have to be aware of the fact that some of the data structures in S4 are different from R3. So, for example, certain tables which you know from R3 might not even exist in S4 anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Therefore, you basically can't reuse the HANA Live content directly on CDS on S4, and this is the technology which is basically used for all the operational reporting inside.
It's basically again a different step modeling-wise. We're just getting used to a graphical modeling, let's say, in calculation views, and because I suppose you can also extend them and build, let's say, more CDSs on top of this.
Right.
So this is, and with the associations, of course, you just mentioned. So this is more or less, again, a new, or not again a new, but a new way of, let's say, modeling some of these data structures.
It's a new way, and it has, in several different aspects, it has certain advantages. One of the advantages is, from a BW perspective, it works better in combination with BW than HANA Live did. HANA Live did pretty well, but one of the problems I always was struggling with in the case of HANA Live was that there was no way to get, for example, if you think about replication, you could use the HANA Live views, of course, also to build a data source on top of them, but you never get your hands on texts, because the texts are always part of the attributes in HANA Live, because there's no separate entity for the texts, and that's a problem if you're dealing or if you're working in a multi-language environment, because then you need some structure which is able to give you all the texts in all different languages at one time.
Right. Yeah.
If you think about BW data sources, there's always the distinction between attributes and text. And that's exactly for the reason that they actually have technically a different key. The key of the text data source is the same as the one for the attribute data source plus the language code.
Ulrich, a small question.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm at a customer who is having a, let's say, traditional ECC system in which I will be using the Toolis 11 logistic cockpit extractors. Mm-hmm. Then my customer transfers to S4HANA. So many of those tables which are being used by the Toolis extractor are no longer present in the ECC source system.
Okay.
Is that also being solved then by CDS views who start acting like the original tables which are no longer there? So my Toolis extractor is still syntactically correct and can be used for data extraction?
That's a good question. So in this particular example, I don't really know. The point is that exactly for the reason you mentioned, that some of the tables will not exist anymore. It's very likely, and currently the colleagues in Business Suite development or in S4 development are evaluating this. Quite a number of the existing content data sources will not work anymore. Right?
True.
And they have to compensate for this. And there are different paths. So short term, there's a strategy to maybe rewrite some of the extractors to make them work based on the new structures which you have in S4. But long term, the strategy is actually to move all this extraction business to CDS as well. Basically, you will have CDS views which give you the same data as your two LIS extractors.
So the Toolis extractors will be phased out in the long term.
In the long term, I mean,
will be replaced by CDS.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That's clarifying. Thank you.
That's what I know about this, right? And now, basically, I mean, it's true. You get this as content. As of now, this is kind of in a text document format. There's no graphical modeling tool, but this is going to come as well, of course, because we know that when you're at an end customer, of course, you want to leverage all this, but you want to be able to have a nice modeling environment to extend these views according to to your own needs or whatever you've done on concerning modifications or customizing in the system. So it's clear that we need something like this. As of now, it's text-based, which also has its advantages, by the way, because it's very easy to copy such a thing. Or if you want to copy it and modify it a little bit, you have all the possibilities of text editors, right? So it also has some advantages, honestly, from my perspective.
And there's probably also some type of cascading approach like we have with HANA Live Views, that you have some customer views, let's say, which you can extend on top of it. So this is probably going to follow that same logic, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the Business Suite part. And as you see, even without any BW info objects, without any really modeled BW info providers, you can basically leverage I would say the whole, it's probably not completely true, but 80% or 90% of the BW OLAP functionality which you know. So you can create such models, and the Business Suite colleagues or the S4 colleagues are doing that. They're creating models which contain attributes, texts, hierarchies, navigation attributes, all this kind of stuff, right? All that in the ECC, in the S4 system.
Okay, one final question from my part then, Ulrich, because I see that these CDS views are, let's say, on top of the actual ECC table. But is this in the future then also Delta compliant?
Sorry,
because, the CDS view you're now showing me, let's say on the Mara table, that of course is reading directly from the Mara table itself.
Yeah.
But I know that many of, let's say, the Toolis 11 extractors are so-called Delta compliant.
Okay.
I do not need a full load, I only need the last change Delta data. And for that, they're also reading from a different queue than, let's say, the master data table itself. Will this in the end also be Delta compliant, or do I need to extract the entire, let's say, VBAK or VBAP table every time that I'm using a CDS view?
Of course not. So basically, the full comfort which you know from especially the LIS area will exist again in the CDS world.
Okay, thank you.
We're not there yet. As of now, if you use this technology, and I can show you this in a second, if you create a BW data source on top of such a CDS view, you will be able to do a full load. Okay. No delta, no automatic delta. Maybe if you have a date field which you can use to create a
delta.
Yeah, pseudo delta, but okay, yeah.
Fine, but you don't have the Q delta as you know it from LIS, where the application even pushes delta into the delta queue and BW can fetch it. That's something which basically the S4 colleagues are working on, in order to basically give you exactly the same capabilities which you're used to from the ERP in S4 as well, and in the connectivity between or interoperability, just to.
That's for you, Ronald.
Thank you.
Interoperability between BW and S4, right? So you will have the same level of comfort which you're used to.
Thanks, Ulrich.
Okay. Now let's come to the BW side. So what does this mean? As Juergen said, it's very nice to have all these capabilities directly in the source system. If you need an operational report in real time, this is the way to go. Even if you have your own tables, maybe you can create such views on top, or you can extend them. If you have additional tables, you can extend the content views by joining additional stuff. It's very easy. But at some point in time, you might come into a situation where this is not enough anymore, right? If you need stable snapshots of data to say, okay, this decision was made on, I don't know, May 26th at 4 p.m. or so, and we had data from 12 p.m. Then somehow you need to be able to persist this data and maybe even track the historic versions of data. So that's when you need BW or the data warehouse functionality on top of the actual operational data, right?
Yeah.
And the nice thing is that this is possible, and that's also due to the fact that, I mean, we saw some of the linking points already. First of all, from a data model perspective, such a CDS model is very much compliant with BW models. We have the same separation of facts, attributes, and text as we know from BW as well. So it's very similar to a classic BW model. It's just modeled in a different way. It's not based on info objects, but based on these CDS documents. But it's very easy to transfer this into BW. So what I can show you here, for example, is a look at this stuff. And now let me go in here. Let's look at the BW system. So that's now a BZH, which is one of the BW development test systems. And I have created a bunch of OpenODS views based on the CDS views in the source, right? Because, and that's also one of the main integration points from my perspective. If you're a little bit familiar with the kind of OpenODS model or modeling approach, it's very, very similar. It's basically identical to what you see in the CDS area. You also have entities, you have associations, you have the same possibilities to assign semantics to fields, all that kind of stuff. So basically, you can use the CDS model in the business suite or in the S4 system, and as of now, you would have to rebuild it on the BW side manually. So you can, for example, here take this sales document item view, which we just looked at, and build an OpenODS view on top of it, and then you can start associating, for example, an OpenODS view for the material view, which we just saw in the one which we just discussed, the one defined on the Mara table, right? And you can basically create the same associations as we have them in the source system. And you can basically now run exactly the same report which we saw in the source system now on the BW side without any persistency in a remote way, right?
So this is leveraging the smart data access virtual table approach.
This would be smart data access to the system, well, yeah, to the system which we saw, accessing the sales document items, and we could run exactly the same report as we saw it in the source. And then, of course, you know how the game works. This could either be a remote BW system, as we have it here. It could also be the embedded BW system.
Yeah.
And you know, now we have all the BW services at hand. So now you can, for example, choose that you want to have a persistency and an ADSO with fields created from the sales document items here and filled from the sales document items. If you want to take snapshots, for example, right? Now you basically have, and that's why we have this word extension in the title, how you can slowly kind of grow from a very operational scenario where everything is direct access and it's very lean. You either take the CDS content as it is, or you model some additional views on top. And then you can also slowly start growing into the BW world by basically taking the CDS model, transferring it into an open ODS model, as we have it here. Right? It's basically from the idea, it's pretty much the same. Unfortunately, right now it's a lot of work because you have to model all the views individually. Whereas ideally, of course, the BW system could just ask for all the association information, all the metadata which the CDS views bring automatically, and rebuild and build this OpenODS model automatically. That would be much nicer. And we're trying to convince our colleagues in development to basically deliver that, because that would really mean that you have to push one button in your BW system, either remote or embedded, and you have the whole functionality and the whole richness of the model which the source system brings in one click. That would be really cool. And then you can start growing from we saw this from the operational source over something which we denote as OpenODS or data in hub layer, or you can even start building a data warehouse if you take really version snapshots of the data, not just one snapshot at a time which you override, but you can also kind of track the changes and keep a history. And then you're basically in the area of what we call the domain data warehouse, and that really allows you to pretty seamlessly grow from the lowest stage to concerning or with respect to service levels to kind of more elaborate ones.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a very cool peek into the future, let's say, into the very near future. So I'm also guessing that there will be, we had, I know in SP9 the possibility to translate an OPODS view into an OTSO, let's say, per system by pushing a button. That will be the same approach in, I guess.
Right. That would be basically the step to take a physical snapshot of.
Right.
And it could also be part of the embedded system. By the way, it could come up with even fancier ideas. You could say, well, if I'm in the S4 context, and I'm pretty much happy to say 99% with the reporting I can do with CDS, but I want some additional data which I load regularly, and I want to have this joined to my S4 data. And of course, you could come up with ideas of saying, well, why not use embedded BW for that? Maybe create an ADSO with fields in the embedded BW, load the data in there, and then create a CDS model which joins this DSO with the operational data. Right? You have both ways. You can either do it on the S4 side by basically bringing external sources like from an ADSO into the CDS world via CDS views, or you can do it the OpenODS way, which is probably the better way if you have a remote. The preferred way if you have a remote BW, but you can also do it in an embedded BW and then decide where the majority of data resides or what model fits better.
Yeah, but lots of options now. Well, I'm guessing, Ulrich, if you have a Suite for HANA system, which is sort of the public version, then we'll probably don't have. That's probably also only for the on-premise rollout, I guess. If you really have an embedded BW, would that be part of the? Do you know that if that will be part of the public S4 HANA suite?
Good question. I mean, technically it will be part of it, but I don't know if you can easily get access to it. So from a user's perspective, because that would be, I mean, then you're very heavily going to something like customizing your system, and that's of course contradicting the whole cloud idea.
Right.
If you take a look back in history, Ulrich, the birth of SAP BW, it was called back then, was based upon the fact that, let's say, operational reporting on the traditional ECC system took so much performance away that the data needed to be replicated to a separate BW system, and that's where, let's say, the distinction between SAP BW and ECC started. We diverted. Yeah. When I look at the roadmap now, and also within this call, it looks like we're pushing as much as possible back, let's say, to the original or operational system, to the ECC system or the S4HANA system. can't we then, let's say, run the risk that history will be repeating and that we are executing so many operational reports on the ECC system itself that, again, we will have the performance bottleneck?
I mean, the performance bottleneck itself is not going away, of course. It will be somewhere, at some point in time, we will end up with performance problems.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that with HANA, we can really push the limits, right? I mean, it's now, we have far more compute power than we used to have. We're far better suited for bringing together OLAP and OLTP than before. So, of course, if you do heavy reporting with hundreds of thousands of concurrent users, you will definitely end up in a problem at some point, and it's at some point sheer compute power will not be sufficient anymore.
No, because at this moment, all our architects all over the world are making a decision where, let's say, operational reporting needs to land. And if you make that decision now, it will be very harsh if you have to come back to that decision in a couple of years because your operational system is not running or performing anymore. So,
I mean, I have two answers to that. The first answer is that, first of all, now we have a lot of technically good capabilities in the source that we didn't have before. Right?
True.
It starts with the database. It starts with the model. Such a multidimensional model in the source system is very valuable, and we never had it. You could run, of course, some ABAP reports in the source system and call it operational reporting, but now it's really OLAP, right? And so that's a completely different thing. And the second thing is, and that's exactly the point why we stress this kind of evolutionary approach in bottom-up modeling. You can start on the source, and if you see it doesn't work, and even if it's just for performance reasons, then you can, with very little effort, move it to the next stage, right?
And that will be the BW system, the next stage.
It can be an external BW system. It can also be the embedded BW. I mean, of course, what happens if you run this report, which we just did? You're doing all these joins every time.
Mm-hmm.
That consumes a lot of
computing power.
And it's maybe not worth it, right? So even in that case, it might be you might be better off if you don't have real-time requirements to just take a snapshot once a day, right? And then you have this join executed once, and the query just goes to a flat table, which is much far less resource intensive than it used to be before. So that's also a way to manage resources, of course.
Yeah, true.
Well, I think that's a good part, right? Today we have options. You can do it. You can keep it in the course. You can start off. It really is what you say. It's an evolutionary approach, and you can take it step by step. Let's say.
And that's the point, that you don't have to kind of forget about all the stuff and rebuild it again, but you can start with the simplest solution which you can think of. And if it doesn't fulfill the requirements, or if you don't have the resources, you have a way to compensate. But you can still leverage a lot of the stuff which you built for the initial solution. That's the whole point.
Thanks, Ulrich.
Being wrong or kind of guessing the wrong solution first is not as expensive anymore. That's the point.
Nice. Okay. Well, wrapping it up. So we have basically the birth of the domain data warehouse, more or less, and we can combine it with an enterprise data warehouse like we had before. And of course, we have. Especially with Suite van HANA now, clearly two approaches where we have a top-down and a bottom-up modeling approach. And we can have, let's say, a step-by-step evolutionary approach of getting from one to the other. And that's the good part. And of course, the great part is that we have many, many options to choose from. Any famous last words, at least for this podcast?
Last click to show you.
Yeah.
To show my screen again. Just because we were talking about resources. And of course, I mean, this is not a performance test, but I just ran the query which we saw again on this sales document item view, and I took the BW statistics. Now let's see how much data we were actually looking at.
You're not sharing your screen.
Not sharing yet, Ulrich.
Okay, too bad. Then that's.
I will believe you whatever you say, Ulrich. If you say random.
No, I will prove it to you. So let's display statistics data here in RSRT, run the same query again.
Don't use a cache.
We're done. And how much data did we read for this query? It's 65 million records. So that's not too bad. I mean, that's.
But at 0 seconds.
It's well, the time it took
almost,
is
half a second, was it?
5 seconds.
65 million.
Data manager. Wow, that's impressive.
It's not bad, right? I mean,
I would say so.
That's the point. That's something which we were not able to do before. Of course, that changes things. Now, of course, if you have hundreds of thousands of people clicking this button,
that's different.
The system will always blow up, even if it's the biggest HANA you can imagine. But the limits have, they're different. We know where America is, you know.
Yeah. Ulrich, you've convinced me that HANA will be a game changer. So thanks for that.
Another nice.
Yeah, really right. Cool. Thanks all for the demo. Well prepared. Thanks. Cool.
Juergen and Ulrich, thank you very, very much for this insightful look into the very near future. When will the CDS views be broadly available? Is that the same time, I guess, as the Suite for HANA will be put into the marketplace, or maybe a little late?
As a content, yes. So if you're talking about the S4 content, then it comes with the first S4 shipment, I think in fall this year.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I don't know exactly what the release date is. I think the technology is to some extent already contained in NetWeaver 7.4. But in the version where also BW can connect to CDS views, I think you need NetWeaver 7.5, which is basically the NetWeaver release underneath the S4 shipment.
Right.
So fall this year should be the time frame.
Great. Well, great peek into the near future, and thank you very, very much for your insights. Juergen, thank you very much for attending the call. And well, that wraps it up. That's episode number 16. And we'll hope to talk to you soon again in the future.
Of course, anytime.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Grüß Gott. Tschüss.